speech, we're kind of leaning toward the Confederate side. But you should also know that during the Civil War especially, this war between the states, well, I see nothing civil about war at all. You should know that some of us had considered it the war of northern aggression, but there were also many pacifists and southern abolitionists. My problem was I could not convince my sons of such a thing, and I had some difficulty coming up here to Missouri in order to help Ken and finding them after that Order 11. But I noticed everything just seems to keep falling, like when the children play those little games of marbles and dominoes. I mean, I just could not understand how it all started, and this animosity towards the Southern lady who's just listening. But what happened is that Southern sympathizers were arrested down in Kansas City. And not just arrested, these are ladies, these are women, children, and they were put in a horrible building down there, and they were shackled to the walls, and it collapsed, and many died. And this, of course, upset others, so Quantrell decided he was going to take revenge, and vengeance was his, he decided, and he did Lawrence, Kansas. Well, then Ewan got upset because he lost friends in Lawrence, and it was just horrible, and so he put an Order 11, and your famous artist, George Cable Bingham, wrote him a letter himself, and he said, that is an act of idiocy, and told him not to do the Order 11, but he did it anyway. So then we had women and children out of their farms, and they had only 15 days to get rid of their grain, turning them to military outposts in 4 counties that bordered in southern Kansas. And they walked the streets. You lost Missouri. They kept walking. They went down to Arkansas. Others stood on the riverbanks begging river pilots to please give them a ride. And then there was me, who showed up. Well, I showed up looking for my relatives, cause of Order 11. And my sister was beside herself, because I had told you the last time about Charlotte becoming a soldier, which still has me so shocked. I mean, she might have been a little Missourian girl, but she's still Southern roots. I mean, this is Little Dixie, folks, in case somebody hasn't been paying attention. And you are not supposed to be fighting like a man. But she is, all because her husband Roberts died, and I still haven't found her. But they arrested me about that spy business, which wasn't true. I mean, okay, there's a lady. She's from Mississippi. She's in St. Louis, McClure. Well, she was a Confederate spy. Just because we're both from Mississippi doesn't mean I had tea with the woman. I never met her, and I'm not a spy. But that Colonel Lazia, I swear, he's just a fuss budget, and he decided that you have to be on one side or the other. And he was going to keep me. They first were going to interview me. I was like, interview? I may be naive, but I am not a fool. And I was really scared because nobody knew I was there down in Brownsville. I think they're thinking of changing the name to Sweet Springs or something like that. But Brownsville's just bustling with stuff. So there I'm in Brownsville being questioned by this captain. And finally I thought, how am I going to get out of this pickle? I just don't know what to do. So I just read that last poem I had written, and I would like to read it again. I know some of you heard of it. I see new faces. And this is what got me out of that pickle. The land is torn in two. Who will live but a few? Fields need plowing. Creeks run red. Young and old, so many are dead. I did not know what war could rule until one son fought for the blue, the other son for the gray. What can a Southern mother say? Folks ask me where I stand on the issues of the day. I used to not know what to say. Now I ask what they would pay. There's only so much one can face. No choice. I stand in one place, holding their rusted toys. I stand on the graves of both my boys. And this is what happened in Missouri. Brother against brother, father against son. In Mississippi it wasn't as evident, but in Missouri it was. And then when you lose your loved one, people don't understand. Those women are walking down the streets with their children hanging onto their petticoats, and they've given up everything on their farm. Nobody paid them for that farm. Think about the husbands, and they're missing. And some of them are missing even in death, because there are mass graves across the country, and you don't know where your loved one is buried. This one is called The Breeze, for a younger widow than I shared this. Heartfelt moments, your breath and touch, your smell and kisses, yet now ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Yet I remember a soft snore, feeling your breath on the evening breeze. Then there are people that you know are suffering that are your kin. I figured after I locate my sister and my niece, if she should ever surface, and I just hope she's not discovered as a soldier, I have to go to Alton, Illinois. And people don't understand. You see, the 2 Confederate prisons in St. Louis, but they got overcrowded. And there was an old prison back in 1833 in Alton, and it closed down. Well, you have these federal commanders and stuff, and there's a Major General Halleck, and then there's a commander of the Department of Reserve, and then his lieutenant, Colonel, was McPherson, and they decided to take a trip to Alton, and they looked at it, and they decided, oh, well, we'll just put Confederate prisoners there. Only cost them $2,000 to renovate it, and they put them in, and that's where they sent my kin, Samuel Houston Luss. The first prisoners went there in '62, and then what happened was that there were 13th U.S. Infantry that were going to be their guards, but in the 3 years of a war, there'll be 11,000 Confederates that'll go through there. Many will die. People always like to talk about the horror of the southern prison, Andersonville. Well, you know, to the victor belongs the spoil. Nobody decided to walk into the Union prisoners. In fact, in Andersonville, as hard as it was, and they done hung that commander, but they actually had men stealing from their own men. And so the commander said, you round them up and we'll try them, because they were taking blankets from their own sick. And so that was taken care of there, but nobody ever talks about that part. I would like to meet Matthew Brady and tell him about some of the photography he missed. But Sam Houston Lusk, he ended up the last 15 months of the Civil War in Alton, so that's why I have to go up there. But one thing he did is that he left me some notes. And the thing is I think it's interesting that Alton kind of closed it down, because Sam got out in, let's see, June '64, and here we are, yeah, 65, that's right, and they closed it July '65. So he got out a month before it closed. He'd been shot in the shoulder, broken collarbone, and got shot in the thigh. That's why he didn't escape with his friends. Skinny thing. He was a skinny boy when he went in. Never could put meat back on the bones of his. But the thing is that I went into Sam's notebooks and we talked. And I do want you to understand that, yes, it is true that some people think that Southern ladies exaggerate, but I want to correct that misnomer right now. We do not exaggerate. We merely think big, okay? So you just all get that straight. Now, Samuel Houston Lusk is a real person. He was a private serving in the Mississippi 17th Infantry. And this is his voice and him speaking. Samuel, the war was over, but no one told me until a few weeks later, and it would be a month before we were papered and released. I feel mighty sorry for Robert E. Lee. Must have been real hard on old Bobby and Jeff Davis and all of them. I told the fellows I was crying for old Bobby Lee while I was wiping away my tears. I feel real sad for all of us. It's hard coming home without a victor's crown. There's no one waiting for me outside that gate, but that's all right, because I was free, hungry, chilled to the bone, and tired, but free. Sitting inside Alton Military Federal Prison for 15 months gave me a lot to ruminate about. Now that I was free to go home and choose how to live my life, I really understood what freedom was and what freedom is. And everyone, no matter color, needs to be free. I don't own any people, never did, and just never thought of them as real people, and I know different now. Illinois is a pretty far piece from Mississippi when you're walking it barefoot. I'm not complaining, because at least I can walk, thanking the Lord every step. I did not lose any limbs. I was shot, yes. But you know, I moved slow, most likely will for the rest of my life. I don't know sure for yet, because I'm only 25. But I stood my ground, though, and I hold my head up proud. No matter how shaky, I stood. Yankees, they done offer me to sign up for them and fight for my own kind, but I couldn't do that. And then they said I could recant and promise not to fight for the Confederacy and take the oath, and I could join the Federals and go out west and fight Indians. I never even saw an Indian, so I didn't think that was a good idea. I thought long on it, and I didn't have anything against nobody. Just never wanted any government, some Yankee in Washington telling me how to live. I'm called a preacher now, because fellas say I always talk about God. Say I talk about God too much, but hell, how they think I make it through. Too skinny and weak to do it on my own. No one understands unless they've been there. I just want to go home and be in Mississippi. Samuel Houston Lusk was my great-great-grandfather.
Thank you.
Finding everything such a trial. I mean, the war is ending down, and look at me, I'm having to wear a fox. Everybody knows a fashion woman should be wearing ermine in this time of year, but I've been relegated to fox. Now, you met my little cousin there. Well, I'm Madeline, and I tell you, she is a thorn in my side. She tried to take all the family money and make it into Confederate. I thought, child, I'm not going to argue with you, but if your daddy left me in charge, I'm keeping gold. So now I'm kind of stuck having to take care of her, not to mention Samuel, because she insists on going to a prisoner of war camp, and I'm thinking, oh, it's so dirty, I don't want to go. But I'm really having a desperate time trying to find a decent cup of tea. You know, in 1861, you can get a pound of tea for $10. Now it's up to $40 a pound for a decent cup of tea. If I have one more cup of Jeff Davis tea, I'm going to scream. That, you know what that is? Okay, Jeff Davis tea is the matter. You're taking sassafras roots and sage and you're mixing it together and boiling it. And then they expect me to sweeten it with watermelon rinds. See, we don't have any sugar. So you're supposed to take all the watermelon rinds and boil it down. So I'm supposed to have this stuff made out of berries and leaves, even huckleberry leaves. And then I'm supposed to enjoy tea. I was like, I don't think so. But what my cousin doesn't understand is that things are going to kind of change. But don't anybody tell her about the gold, because that's going to upset her. And it's not my fault that the South lost because I didn't take my gold. I'm just a small businesswoman. But let me tell you, there is so much going on that people just don't understand. And I came across these young men. And there are some things, I'm not a hard businesswoman, just there are some things that can even touch my heart. And this was once a poem that was written called A Weeping Willow. Y'all come hither now to hear the sad fate a Reb's mama left waiting at the gate. Out of Alton prison in ragged files, men as lost as the war, no more trials. Her son did not appear. She grabbed a hand. Surely her boy was fine. Could he not stand? Young men, wounded and weak, stared at the ground. An old Ozark boy his words finally found. Ma'am, I'm right sorry to tell you the tale. More than one way to stand, and your boy done fail. He done signed papers, took the oath, went west. Ma'am, we done tried to help him pass the test. She fell into his arms with cries and tears. No one could help her or soothe her fears. My boy would be better off dead, sleeping. Oh, shame, no loyalty, my heart's weeping. Barely breathing, falling, she clutched her breast, and later Rebs sobbed as they laid her to rest. The boy's real sorry her son was not brave. Willow leaves blow, weeping over her grave. Words read carved on the cross for grave's cover. Here lies love, our true Southern mother. Heritage. There are different things that have happened in the South, and things have come to surface, making many uncomfortable. Heritage boughs snapping, family trees, broken branch, scattered seed, transplant new, dark, rich soil, digging up dry roots, saplings stripped, grafting pains, fresh daughters, tied strongly. Beware, South, fresh new growth, different crops. Children lost. She brought the children to her and she stared. She saw a family in them, the shape of the head, the tilt of the nose, the color of eyes. One had softer hair, yet they were darker, yet they were his. She hated him, and therefore she hated them. She took them to Kentucky, sold them, and cried, I'm sorry, I got to take care of my own. But I never forgot, for I was sent away. When I found her after the war, she saw me plain and clear. War being over, she paled. My brothers stood beside me. She asked if I wanted to take her house. I spit on her hem, said I would take nothing from such a witch, but I have my daddy's name, 'cause you never asked. Unlike you, he loved my mama. He chose her over you. He loved us more than yours. He left us something, told me to never tell. We have our own land and house. My daddy would have married mother, but it was against the law. He was with her and jumped the broom before you. You were the kept woman. Maybe I should have never done that. It was mean and spiteful, but the Lord knows what she did without caring where my brothers went and with who. And her children, the half-brothers. Daddy had two families. How he reconciled that with the Lord, I do not know. But I do know he loved me. And he told me all the time, he took good care of us all. He said it was his real home. And I like to think that if Mama had not died, and if it had not been against the law, that we would never have been found, and we would have all been happy. And that's what I like to remember. But then there are women that had much harder than me. But when you pass and you're fine, you can go off and get educated, and nobody need never know, except you never can marry, because you don't know what will happen if you have a child. But this was from New Orleans, faded love. Worn, tired, cracks and lines, faded color, wiping off face paint, flesh flaws exposed, grooves, liquid, fills the crow's feet crevices, and she stares, wiping harder, truth not absorbed, eyes dead, self-hatred, faded beauty. The coffers are filled with lies, filled from her body sold, alone, lying myths. No one loves her, discard. Aging is so rough, the past kept woman. He left the cards, the drink, younger women, and she weeps. New Orleans chills her olive's dark skin. Walking alone and no place to go, the river waters call, and plunging she leapt. Yelling, I ran fast, too late, I failed. Face down she floated in a silk billowing. The bridge wall holds a box with her name etched. The box has well-preserved orchids and dried roses, and the notes had scattered them when death calls him. I found him playing cards. He threatened me. I stood and I buried her in the edge of the family cemetery. And I wrote, here lies Orchid Rose. The gravedigger man, he asked, who she be? And truth speaks. I said, should have been my sister-in-law. These are things that happened in life. And the sad part is that when people deny their own. In Missouri, in fact in Sedalia, we had a lot of foreign women because Sedalia ended up having quite a reputation, and it was mainly because of the cattlemen and the railroaders, and so there were some houses of ill repute, some called them brothels, but the ladies ended up being quite fond of the gentlemen, and sometimes even helped bury those that were poor. People think that's very horrible, but they have to understand how poverty could affect women in so many different ways. And then, of course, there was that Civil War interview. I didn't mean for my cousin to have trouble. Of course, she wouldn't know McClure, but I did. So, yes, some family money kind of moves things. Well, that's just how it should be. So I always thought it was so interesting what happened with Miss McClure down there in St. Louis, and I had to laugh even though my little cousin's kind of so confused. But like I said, she's my little thorn in the side, so I guess I'm going to take care of her and everybody else. But see, Miss McClure's punishment, they took her house in St. Louis and they sold all her furniture and they made it into like a little prison, and they brought some other ladies in, they put up cots, and the Yankees came in and stayed on the first floor. So Miss McClure, with a little bit of connections due to some of us being smart enough to keep in the fold, Miss McClure, her punishment was, it was quite horrible. She was exiled. She was told, you go back to Mississippi. They escorted her halfway and she's never to come back to Missouri. I think that's very interesting, don't you, how that happened? And yet those other ladies went down to a prison in Kansas City. But what I find really interesting is that if people will study history, they're going to find that Miss McClure was buried in St. Louis, Missouri. So you have enough gold, you can come back anywhere you want. Isn't that a shame? But at the same time, I don't know. Anyway, I'm just not going to tell my cousin because she's just going to go on and on. But you see, the reason I kept the gold is because it was her fault. You see, she's always into the Bible, and she's always going on and on about the Bible. And that's why she became an abolitionist, and that's why she did this or that. And so, half the times I kind of doze off when she goes on and on. I mean, we're supposed to go to church. It's the best way to make social context, but you're not supposed to get carried away. And she definitely got carried away. So she tells me about the Hebrew children freeing slaves every 7 years, and then if they don't want to, they put an ear against the door and all gets put in. And I thought, well, I don't see anybody down in Mississippi going to free anybody in 7 years. But I said, I don't want to talk about that. But then she started talking about the unity of prayer and power, and I thought, wait a minute, are you telling me that there's more power in prayer, like you've got a whole bunch of people in agreement? And she said, well, of course.
And then she thought I wanted to go to church. I said, no, let's not move too fast here. And so it occurred to me, if you got 4 million slaves and they're all praying in agreement, well, I hate to tell people this, but I figured the South was going to lose, and that's why I kept the gold. It was that simple. So it's really her fault, but at the same time, it all had to work out, because somebody's got to take care of all these relatives that they meant well, and actually nobody knows, and I'm trusting you not to tell. I mean, that's why I have the special braid. It kind of shows a military influence. So I am going to be with the Confederate ladies, and they don't have to know exactly what I did. So I think it's all going to work out in the end. But I just am so glad that you so invited me here, even though I still think there's problems with manners besides the tea. Look at this thing. I went to have a drink. Somebody gives me this and said, this is a napkin. This is the size of handkerchiefs. A napkin is supposed to be wide. It's supposed to cover my skirt. I mean, honestly, I'm just having to suffer through so many things. And there's so much etiquette I still have to push. But I think that the daughters of the Confederacy will understand, especially when I throw the gold around. But I thank you so much, and I hope to see y'all later.